Are you tired of your shifter feeling sloppy?
You're gonna get me in trouble.
Do you get embarrassed when you show it to other people and it just flops around instead of doing what you want it to?
Hey yo, what the f?
Does it keep you from doing things that you used to be able to do on command, like say, getting into reverse? Well, I've got the perfect prescription just for you. What's up guys, we're back at it again with another video on how to turn your salvage, neglected, junked out project car and turn it into the build of your dreams. This is a DSSR, or a dual shear selector rod. I call it dual shear because it has two lobes on each end which support one of these rods. This comes with solid bushings as opposed to rubber like on the stock shifter, and will basically reduce a lot of that slop that we get from the stock setup by making everything solid and preventing any twisting of that center metal rod. We also have a billet ball bearing selector joint. This actually connects directly to the transmission and allows the shifter connected through this DSSR to articulate enough to hit all 6 different gears that you have, from reverse all the way to 5th. The stock rod only has one bar, as you can see, and allows for play in this direction, where this captures the other end and prevents any rotation, especially under hard shifting or hard driving. The stock selector also has what looks to be either plastic or rubber for the bushing, which means that it can deteriorate and actually is slightly worn down just looking at it, which will add to play in the joint as opposed to the ball bearings. And it's also very common for the foam insert that goes onto this side of the joint to wear out over time. In this case, it's completely gone. It's just disintegrated, disappeared, poof. Yeah, once that wears out, then you have a ton of free play in your horizontal rotation. So the new joint comes with a new foam piece that I have no idea how long it'll last, but will definitely improve our shift field overall. Now, it's extremely hard to see underneath the car, but we just so happen to have an extra transmission sitting over in the corner of the garage. So I'm gonna grab that, show you exactly how the stock linkage works, and I'll show you all the little tricks that I use to get these parts off, as well as how we're going to reinstall the new stuff. And then all you have to do is figure out how to work your hands into the transmission tunnel to do it yourself. Here we have obviously the transmission. This right here is the shifter carrier, which mounts to the transmission as well. Some cars from factory actually have the carrier mounted inside the car, but in this case, it's a completely separate mechanism. This is obviously your stock shifter. Normally you have a plastic spherical bushing that this sphere locates into. Basically keeps the shifter centered in this carrier right here. We have our shift rod, which is held onto the bottom of the shifter with a C-clip, as well as to the selector with another C-clip. This point on the E36 goes into a bushing in the top of the trans tunnel, which is supposed to dampen left and right movement like this. Definitely wears out over time. And the final part is this shifter carrier clip right here. As you can see, it's already damaged from me removing it. Because I have a chassis mounted shifter, that basically the chassis replaces the need for this shifter carrier. But another name for this in the BMW community is the clip. Because it's an absolute to get off while mounted inside the car. I'll show you guys how I removed all this stuff and put it on my new transmission in a second, so that you guys don't have the same struggles that I did. What's interesting about this setup is because the previous owner put a chassis mounted shifter and left this carrier in here, you can see how it's been gouged right there, little metal shavings. It's also been gouged on the underside, well, basically by a shifter that does not want this in the way of interfering with its movement. So I'm really expecting to get 5th gear back when I reinstall all the new stuff. Being able to see this outside of the car is going to help you significantly with removing old parts and putting new parts in. So now that we've identified the problems with the stock shifter setup, I'm going to show you how to disassemble it off the car, because it'll be much easier to show than underneath the car with the limited space we have. And I'll see if I can give you some tips on how to access it while you're facing upwards instead of from here. With the visualization of exactly how everything comes apart out here, it should make everything a lot easier when you do this on your car. First things first, let's get these C-clips off of the shift rod using a flathead or a pick. Then you can pull the rod out of the way and move on to probably the most difficult part of this whole process. Unless you know to pry on that central tab to get the clip to release and rotate out of the way. With the carrier off, it's time to move on to the selector joint. I'm using a flathead and a hook to pull this metal ring out from its channel. It takes some effort, especially flying blind with a drive shaft in your way. But with it removed, the last step is to push the pin out of the hole in the selector joint and it'll fall right off. So here's everything that comes off. We have the carrier, the shifter itself, the shift rod, the clip or shift carrier clip, whatever you want to call it, the shift selector, the selector joint right here, along with the locking pin, and the two C-clips that hold the shift rod onto the shifter itself and to the shift selector. I use an assortment of tools that basically help me reach all these things while underneath the car. Just different length screwdrivers. I had a long one and a short one. Pick tools are super useful. 100% recommend getting these if you don't have them already. Assortment of different lengths and angles. And I think it's a 4.5 millimeter Allen key, allows you to get this pin out of the selector joint easily. The reinstallation should basically be the exact reverse. Only difference is we have the brand new foam inside our new selector joint, meaning that we're going to have to press fit this onto the transmission and feed the top joint in while underneath the car, basically blind. I'm really hoping I can do this without dropping the drive shaft and the exhaust, but I've heard that it is entirely possible. I might have to do that. And naturally, if you have a chassis mounted shifter or installing one like I have, then you do not need this carrier. The chassis essentially takes the place of this carrier in a chassis mounted shifter. If you are keeping your stock shifter or are using some other shifter that is not chassis mounted and continues to use a carrier, then you probably want to replace and upgrade the bushing inside the car that point connects to on the carrier, and either replace this front carrier bushing or just get an entirely new carrier that does not have that worn out soft rubber issue. Alright, so now you have a basic understanding of how to disassemble and reassemble the shifter assembly on most BMWs, but specifically on the E36 platform. Now the question is, how easy is that to do with the exhaust and drive shaft still in place on the car? That's what we're about to find out. I'll let you guys know, but hopefully it's not too bad. I'm going to try pre-installing the C-clip for the selector joint like this so that there's room to fit the dowel pin in. Hopefully this works and I don't have to fish it out, because that would really suck. So after game planning for hours, it's finally time to dive in and tackle the real deal. If you can't already tell, this entire video has basically been me psyching myself up to tackle a huge job that a lot of people absolutely despise. Hopefully by seeing the entire process outside of the car, I can save myself and you a ton of pain and suffering. All right, we finally got the clip right there out. Basically with the screwdriver, stuck it in here and kind of just finagled it, twisting, pushing, pulling on this little lip right here so that it could flip backwards like this, and then it should just slide right out, just like that. Now, we push this forward, hope that there's enough play to get this dead bushing out. Oh, that would make a ton of sense. Even the bottom of this is loose. That needs to be tightened significantly. That's loose. That is fail if I've ever seen one. Now we just need to remove that by pulling off the circlip, probably with our pick again. And then there's a dowel that should come out, and that should be it. All right, so we just got, which supposedly is the hardest part, knock on wood, of this whole job in really easily. Knock on wood again. Basically what we did, we used our left hand We preset the C-clip on the front side of the selector joint, just in front of the groove. We preset the dowel pin on the top of the selector joint because the foam inside prevents it from sliding all the way through. And then we simply applied pressure towards the front of the car on that nub, that silver nub right there at the end of the selector joint, and used our thumb to apply pressure downwards towards the ground on the dowel pin. From there, I just pulled the C-clip back into its groove, made sure that it rotates somewhat freely so there's no binding, and now we can go ahead and do the rest of the shifter really quick. And we also got all of these tightened up, including the shifter nut itself. So it should be a pretty solid job once I get the DSSR in there.
But of course, like always, we ran into yet another problem. Either the DSSR is too skinny to fit on the shifter, or the crappy aftermarket shifter is too thick to fit on the DSSR. So I'm resorting to using my wire strippers to force the DSSR's prongs wide enough to fit the shifter in place. So finally, after riding the struggle bus for way too long, and let's give this new setup a test. Still a little bit of play in each gear left and right. There's almost no front to back play, but our 3-speed is at least now a 4-speed because we have access to 5th gear again. If you're gonna buy cheap parts, please at least install them correctly. The chassis mounted shifter means you don't need the carrier, and if you leave it, it'll lock you out of gears. Reverse works perfectly now. Overall, the shifter is a little bit stiffer, but feels way more precise and easy to get into the proper gear. Unfortunately, 3rd gear has left the chat and will not be coming back anytime soon. Next logical step, new transmission and a baller reel shifter.